you feel about the win right now?
Amazing. To come in here and inside the Rose Bowl and beat a team like that is amazing. Our guys fought hard, both offensively, defensively, in the kicking game. So proud of my guys.
For those final minutes, I mean, for all that was at stake, the team looked fairly poised, defense, offense. Was that the case? I mean,
yeah, that's the different part of our team this year. So once things hit adversity, guys come together and believe in one another. We keep our poise. Our coaches do a great job of keeping adverse situations in practice. Prepares for us in these games.
A lot had to happen for you to win the title, and you did. What's the feeling like to clinch the division?
It's amazing. That's what we set our team goals for. At the beginning of the season, a lot of people, didn't believe in us. We used that as a chip on our shoulder. Just work hard and believe one another inside this room, our team, and guys really show that on the field.
At the same time, Taylor, when they were down, driving for that go-ahead score inside the 10, and then Chris Young comes up with that big sack, what were you feeling like then?
It gives me chills. Think about our defense. They're the best in the Pac-12. One of the best in the nation. I got full belief in them, all of those guys, and when they play together, it's so fun for me to just sit back and watch Coach Graham coach, and just the different things that our defense does. It's awesome.
How the offensive line played the first half?
Amazing. Our offensive line, they do a great job of protecting myself, opening holes for Marion and DJ and DeAndre. I always tell them, it starts with them, finishes with them. They're a big team, big guys. They're starting to work as a unit, and it's starting to show up.
When you won 4 straight now, you just beat a highly rated team. How good do you feel about the way this team's playing toward the end of the season?
We're finishing. That's what, we got to trust our training. And, all the summer workouts, spring workouts, winter workouts, it's, paying off.
What did you see the adjustments that UCLA was making on you guys in the second half?
We just couldn't, complete a couple, third downs. In that aspect, UCLA's got a great coaching staff, and they made some great adjustments at halftime, and just them coming out, and if we could have, put a couple in, on those third downs, it would have been a different game.
How many days do you think have passed since you guys started practice where Todd didn't mention the word championship?
I can't even remember. We broke it out in the summer. We broke out in spring last year. We've been using that word, and we have it all over our building, in our team meeting rooms. That's in the background. We see that every day, and guys are believing one another. And, it takes everybody, this third string quarterback, third string running back to believe and practice hard, and we got guys doing that every day.
What was that scene like, going over to the stands after the game was over and being a part of that, for all the work that you've done and to be in that moment?
They're our 12 man. For them to come out here, and support, I'll never forget that moment. And those guys, now play Arizona, U of A, at home. It's going to be rocking. And then the Pac-12 Championship game, it's going to be great.
You're going to halftime with a huge lead. I mean, was this the word even keel repeated maybe 10,000 times during halftime?
Yeah, just play play what we do. Keep going out there. Keep the tempo up. Guys don't let up. Guys we didn't. Our guys fought hard. They made some great adjustments offensively and defensively, and they made plays. It's UCLA, and they got a bunch of playmakers, great coaching staff, and they're a great football team.
Do you think that approach helped you when you took one blow after another on offense and defense in the second half, to have that mentality helped you come through, you think?
It did. That's what we trained for every day since spring ball, fall camp. Is, play how we play, do your job, and trust your coaching.
You're going to have to beat Stanford to go to the Rose Bowl. What can you do different against them this time?
Come out in the first half. Show up in the first half. They're a great football team, well coached, disciplined, and in the first half of that game, guys were, we didn't have a good vibe. I didn't have a good vibe of our team, and our coaches are going to get us prepared. And right now we're focused on Arizona. They just beat a high-ranked team, Oregon, I believe, right? And so we got to move on to them and watch the film tonight and tomorrow, and move on to Arizona.
Do you feel like, so much is focused on Marcus Mariota early in this conference? Do you feel like during this winning streak you've raised your profile a little bit?
Yeah, I try not to pay attention to that stuff. I just focus on what I need to do as a quarterback to make my team a championship level team. And for me to all that type of stuff, all my individual accolades will come. And once our team hits our accolades, and so I'm just worried about our team and where we're going from here.
That came off a little bit slow at one point in time in the third quarter. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm fine. It's just a couple hits, so I just gotta do some rehab and get going. I'll be fine.
You've beaten both USC and UCLA now. How do you think the two compare? Those two teams compare?
They're both talented. They got a lot of athletes, and USC is playing great football right now, and UCLA is a great team, and they're very side by side by one another. And, so do they play them next?
Yeah.
That'll be a good game, and so it's going to be a hot fart game like this.
U of A is always a big game, Taylor, but there's even more writing on it now. You guys win that game at home. You host the Pac-12 Championship game. What's that going to be like? That have that extra level on it?
It's going to be awesome. Guys are going to be even more fired up. But the meets, we got to come out and ready to prepare for them. They're a great football team, and so we got to come out and prepare, have a great week of practice, and just do what we do and trust our coaching.
Can you talk about the composure that you guys demonstrated as the Bruins were on the comeback trail?
That's why our coaches, make adverse situations throughout practice, and it shows up in games, and they do a great job of that. And our guys come together and believe in one another, and we keep that post throughout those games.
What was the key to your fast start today?
Tempo. Guys getting lined up. Coach Norvell and Coach Graham, they did a great job calling plays. Getting the play calls in fast. So I give it to my offensive line, and our guys making plays.
Talk about that touchdown before half, where you had 11 seconds left. You got scored.
Coach just said protect the football. We're in the score zone. We're up, so just protect the football. And Jalen, made a great football play. And I love throwing the ball to him and him making a play on it.
You talk about the jubilation of winning here at the Rose Bowl.
It's awesome. Coming into this Rose Bowl, guys, I've dreamed of it my whole life, and we got Arizona and a couple more, and we'll be back here.